The suffering of women in Europe and practices of the Janissary Army during the reign of Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent. Europe witnessed significant expansion of the Ottoman Empire during the reign of Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent, 1520–1566, leading to profound social and political changes. With this expansion, women, both in occupied regions and within the empire, suffered greatly due to the practices of the Janissary Army and Ottoman policies. This article explores the suffering of women during that period, focusing on the role of the Janissaries and related historical events. The Janissary Army and its role in Ottoman expansion. The Janissary Army was formed in the 14th century as an elite force loyal to the Ottoman Sultan. By the time of Suleiman the Magnificent, this army became a key tool in Ottoman expansion into Europe. During the conquest of Belgrade in 1521, women were subjected to enslavement and forced displacement, with many being sold in slave markets as war booty. The suffering of women in Ottoman wars. During the siege of Vienna in 1529, European women suffered from the violence perpetrated by the Janissaries. Cases of rape, murder, and enslavement were widely documented. These practices were not only a means of intimidation but also part of an Ottoman policy to dismantle local communities and weaken their resistance. The devshirme policy and its impact on women. The devshirme policy required Christian families in the Balkans to hand over their sons to the Janissary Army. This policy led to the disintegration of families, forcing women to bear the responsibility of supporting their households alone. The loss of their sons also left a deep psychological impact on mothers, exacerbating their suffering in already exhausted local communities. Women in slave markets. After every major battle, such as the Battle of Mohacs in 1526, thousands of women were sold in slave markets in Istanbul. These women were forced to work as servants or concubines in the palaces of the Ottoman elite. These practices were part of an economic system that relied on the exploitation of humans, particularly women and children. The status of women within the Ottoman Empire. Even within the empire, women faced strict social and religious restrictions. During Suleiman the Magnificent's reign, laws limiting women's freedom, especially in the public sphere, were reinforced. Muslim women were forced to wear the hijab, while non-Muslim women suffered from legal and social discrimination. Women's resistance to oppression. Despite the harsh conditions, stories emerged of women who resisted oppression. In Hungary, for example, some women led secret movements to support resistance against the Ottomans. Within the empire, some concubines in Ottoman palaces attempted to influence policies through their relationships with the ruling elite. The impact of suffering on European societies. The suffering of women in Europe under Ottoman rule left long-term effects on local communities. The disintegration of families and the loss of children led to economic and social decline in many regions. These events also deepened the enmity between Christians and Muslims, affecting East-West relations for centuries to come. The legacy of Suleiman the Magnificent and the Janissaries. After the death of Suleiman the Magnificent in 1566, the practices of the Janissary Army continued to instill fear in Europe. However, the Ottoman Empire began to face internal and external challenges that weakened it. Suleiman's legacy, including the suffering of women, remains a dark part of European history, reminding us of the cost of imperial expansion at the expense of individuals and communities. The suffering of women in Europe under the rule of Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent reflects a dark side of Ottoman history. By understanding these events, We can draw lessons about the impact of wars and imperial policies on the most vulnerable groups in society. These stories remind us of the importance of justice and the protection of human rights in all eras.